Welcome to the Hermetic Astrology Podcast. I'm Gary Caton in Waynesville, North Carolina. You can find me on the web at dreamastrologer.com. And today is Wednesday, January 8th, 2020. So happy Mercury Day, everybody. Mercury is currently in Capricorn, heading into the heart of the sun to join the big rendezvous of Saturn and Pluto, something that a lot of people have been talking about and we've all been waiting for some time. So the big moment is nearly upon us. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But first, I just wanted to wish everybody Happy New Year. This is my first podcast of 2020, so I wanted to wish you all tidings of a new year. And in fact, happy new decade, right? 2020's clear vision. This is actually the first podcast of my third decade. This marks my third decade that I will have been publishing podcasts in. I started out in the 2000s, back in 2008. And the 2010s are gone. Wow. So happy new decade, and thanks for everybody who's been around that whole time. It's been a wild ride, and I've been, always trying to improve and grow as a person and as a podcaster and as a teacher. This year will be no different. Last year, I introduced quite a few new things on the podcast. Went back to a bi-monthly format, started having interviews with people. And it's really funny how that happened because several of the people that I selected to be on the show to introduce y'all to, because I just think they're really cool people. The people over at Astrology Hub agreed, and several of those people, Gemini Brett, Tammy Bronx, Sasha Benedetti, trying to think, there's probably somebody I'm missing. Shireen Shostak. They're all going to be joining me for the Astrology Hub forecast event, and they're going to be Astrology Hub guides for their own particular month later in the year. So I just thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, we had some interviews. We started a YouTube channel. The Hermetic Astrology Podcast is on YouTube now, so you can go and check out the videos and get all the graphics and everything. That's another way that you can get, that you can tune into the podcast. And we started talking about magic on a more serious level. I mean, I've always considered myself to be a magically oriented person. I mean, that's why I got into astrology to begin with, or really it's why astrology found me. I was looking to get magic back into my life, and I ran into astrology. I also expanded the benefits for my premium members. We have several options for people to join as members. There's 3 levels that you can join at. You can find out about that on the page on my website that says special offers. I started a Facebook group for those people where they can interact and they can ask me questions. They sort of have extra access and stuff. We started doing Zoom webinars together, which is pretty cool. So we have we call it the Hermetic Hive because we were looking for an H word that went with a group. And so that's what we are. And I started sending out talismans to my members. So instead of Christmas cards, they got a Jupiter talisman in the month of November. When Jupiter and Venus were at galactic center, I made some Jupiter talismans and sent out to all my members. And then when the sun went by the fixed star Antares, so the sun's in its own triplicity, fire triplicity, so it's dignified, it's conjunct a royal star. I I made some sun talismans and sent those out to everybody, even my overseas people. And the response was overwhelmingly, wow, this is cool. I love this. What do I do with it? Yeah, yeah. So I'm definitely wanting to continue with that. And one of the ways that I'm thinking about doing that is I want to send out talismans to everybody, of course, but like all of you listeners. But that I actually realized I came bumped up against my limits. Like, you know, when you're doing these things, when you're creating them and consecrating them, you have like an hour most at most, where you're in the hour of the planet, and you know you have to get the sigils drawn on everything and pass it through the incense and do the consecration, call in the planet or the star. So there's just so many I can do. But what I thought it would be really cool to do, I was thinking about this the other day. I was in a class. I'm taking a class now for to make talismans out of precious metals. So I was in class the other day, and we were putting the pieces that we had made into the kiln, and the teacher was saying how yeah, you know, first you'll see poof, there'll be a flame, you know, where the impurities start to burn off, and then you'll start to glow and stuff. And I was like, oh wow, that's like Mercury going into the sun, right? He's entering the furnace. um, and so then I had the idea, hey, you know, I'm making a couple of these things. um, Maybe I could share them with my people. So I'm going to be doing a Venus in Pisces talisman giveaway. Woo! And basically what we're going to do is we're going to make it like a contest. And if this sounds cheesy, forgive me, but I think it sounds like fun. We're going to figure out who is the biggest fan of the podcast. All right. And so there's several ways that you can enter. And I'll show you the chart here in a little bit so you can see. In fact, let me just go ahead and pull that up. Yeah, so I'm going to be consecrating these Venus and Pisces talismans on February 2nd. And so if you wanted to make one at home, you too can do that. I'm going to share this chart with you. You have to adjust, of course, for local time and local horizon and whatnot. But we've got Venus in Pisces here. She's past the square to Mars. So that's definitely not something you want as a square to an applying square to a malefic in a talisman chart. Mars in this chart is the out of sect malefic. It's a day chart. So, and Mars is better off in the nighttime. So Mars is the one that's the troublemaker. So we get him down here in the 6th house in a cadent house, nice and safely tucked away. About the only person I wouldn't recommend this talisman for is maybe if you had something around 20 degrees of Sagittarius. Depending on how you deal with Mars energy, it could be refreshing, but this is Venus in Pisces. She's exalted. She's in her, you know, highest vibration. She's got a nice sextile from the moon coming in. And so this is, you know, and it's sun day, but it's Venus hour. So it's Venus's hour. She's culminating. She's in her sign of exaltation. She's making a nice sextile with the moon, who is also exalted. This feels like a really good one to me. And so, yeah, I'm going to be making at least a couple of these. And I thought, you know, why not share them? Because I actually had a dream recently that sort of, I won't say, you know, it introduced the idea of taking these to a wider audience into my consciousness. Because this past year, I've been doing some paper talismans, and I've been engraving on stones and engraving on and sending these out to people, and it's been working really well. but I wanted to up my game a little bit more. But I still hadn't, I still wasn't necessarily like putting them up on my website for sale or anything. I mean, I've sold some, but I haven't been like going super commercial with it. Just kind of slow play and just, working into it. And then I was I was preparing for bed one night, and I was drinking some mugwort tea. And mugwort is known to be good for divination in general, but it's also good for dreaming. And so I asked the spirit of mugwort. I was feeling sort of uncentered, maybe a little bit. I asked the spirit of mugwort, send me a dream from my center. Show me the center. Get me back to the center of things. And the dream that came in was really fascinating because I was in a store. I was in like, I don't know what store it was. It didn't, it was just a store. It's one of them big box store type environments where they have these different desks. You might have like one of the big box stores I'm most familiar with back when I was a contractor. I was always in like Home Depot and Lowe's. And, you have the millwork desk and the lumber desk and the special order desk and all these. So there's one of these desks and I'm going by, and the lady behind the desk, she says, "Hey," and she said, "Hey, come here for a second." Evidently, we're familiar, right? And she says, "You know that thing that you got in your pocket? Wink, wink, nod, nod." And I, realized I had a talisman in my pocket. It's something I do. I carry them around now and then. And she says, I was thinking maybe you could show these people that and tell them about what you're doing. And I guess they were bored or whatever. I was like, well, all right. So I pulled the thing out of my pocket, and as I started to show it to these people, it began to grow. It began to like have like, green shoots like a vine, like growing out of it and stuff. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then so we took it outside, and then it was nighttime, and we were out under the stars, which of course is a really sacred thing for me. And we were like, I was like, well, let's give it some water. If it's growing, it needs water. So we were giving it some water, and then I realized like we weren't just growing it like that, like you grow a plant, but that it was our consciousness was feeding it too, that it was growing like that way. And pretty soon it was like as big as a person, and I was kind of like, holy smokes, what's going on here? And that's when I woke up. So I looked at that and I thought, wow, so that's definitely telling me to like, not that I've been in the closet or anything with it, but to come out with that stuff more. And so I just thought this would be a fun way to kick off the year. And so if you want to enter the Great Venus and Pisces Talisman giveaway, ways you can do that: you can post a review of the podcast on iTunes or Facebook, and be honest. I always think that it's nice if you have constructive criticism. They say it's good to like do it in a, what do they call it, a compliment sandwich. You say something you like, and then you say something you'd like them to change, and then you say something else that but be honest, tell people what, let people know what you like about it, what your experience is. Another way that you can do it is by leaving comments on the Facebook page or on the YouTube, sharing things from the podcast page on Facebook, or sharing episodes, the videos or the audio episodes. You can and like try to personalize it where you could come up with a quote. For instance, you could something that I said about this that stuck in your mind, and you could say, listen to this. Or you could share, oh wow, I never thought of Saturn or Pluto this way, so check it out, and that sort of stuff. So basically, we're just going to be looking for who can get the most, get the word out the most about the podcast, and their reward is going to be, this is fine silver. This is 0.999 fine silver. It's going to be Venus. It's metal, and then it's got the Venus symbol, and it's got like a scalloped shell background, and it's got a patina like that evokes, like, have you ever noticed how the ocean gets those kind of green and blue and different colors at sunset and sunrise? So yeah, it's a beautiful piece, and I'm excited about sharing it. So hopefully people will be excited about that. I do realize that there's some people out there that might be going, yeah, like still kind of like in that humbug mode, right? Because 2019 was pretty rough, y'all. I've never really been a fan. I mean, this is interesting because I think it's actually very plutonic. Um, but I was raised working class and like old school, and like, I mean, my father, he told me, many times, like, you got to be tough, you got to be tough to make it in the world. And so, I've never been a big fan of complaining or, well, I also just don't think it's a very creative place to come from, or a very empowered place to come from. But you know what? I'm with you if you're still complaining about 2019, because man, it was pretty rough. You had Saturn with the South Node and Pluto. Um, I have a friend in the local area. In fact, she's a famous astrologer. In fact, Lee Lehman. And her partner, she cracks me up. She calls the South Node the urinal because it's shaped like this, like that thing that guys pee in. And so it was certainly nice. I definitely felt a shift, once Saturn had gotten past the urinal, and now we're moving, and then I think Jupiter entering into the greater benefic is going to lighten things up anytime. So, and Jupiter has dignity in the first 14 degrees of Capricorn. It's not without dignity. It has by decan in the first 10 degrees, by decan our face, and then it has bounds dignity up to about 14 degrees. So I think that lightened things up a bit. But if you're still feeling like, oh boy, when is this over? Well, guess what? It's almost over. The conjunction is actually the culmination of a process. It's a new beginning, and it's the culmination of a process that's been going on for a very long time. I want to share my screen and show you something that I don't think a lot of people realize. And this goes back to, I've been teaching astronomy for a long time, and a lot of people, they think about astrology mainly in these terms. It's this wheel, and it's kind of like we're looking down on it from what you would call the celestial North Pole. We're kind of looking down, and it's this flat thing, and everything's all in the same plane. But that's not reality. Reality is that things are not exactly on the same plane. And there's a difference in verticality that is worth noting. And when we look at Saturn and Pluto in terms of verticality, here they both are in late Capricorn. Here's the Sun and Mercury coming together, right? If we can go back, and we can go back even as far as 2016. So I'm going to back this up. Oh, it's gone the wrong way there. I'm going to back this up to early 2016. In fact, all the way to late 2015. And we can see here's Saturn here, and here's Pluto. And so if we compare them to this blue line is the celestial equator, right? And here is the winter solstice point. This is the point where the ecliptic is farthest from the celestial equator. That's what defines the solstice. And you can see here that Saturn and Pluto, even though Saturn's in Sagittarius and Pluto's over here in Capricorn, they're kind of the same distance from this blue line. They're forming what's called a parallel, and because they're literally parallel to that blue line, to the celestial equator. They're the same distance away from the equator. And so as we go forward, you can see the next year, yeah, okay, Saturn's further along in Sagittarius, but still on that same basic. Now, this is very unusual, in fact. A lot of times Pluto can be way up here or way down here. So for these two to be on a parallel track is unusual. And to be on a parallel track for so long, we go into 2018, and now Saturn's in Capricorn, and they're still kind of on this parallel track. And so really, we've been in this, here's 2019, they're getting closer. So they've been sort of coming on this parallel track together for like 4 years, right? That's a long time to be under the auspices of such a heavy transit, you know? It's funny, I had to remind myself to look at some different viewpoints. And I was looking at COSI the other day, Combination of Stellar Influences by Mr. Ebertine. And they tend to be a little bit more, I would say, objective. I don't know if it's a German thing or if it's just an Ebertine thing, but on the Saturn-Pluto page, he talks about psychological correspondences, tenacity and toughness, endurance, the capability to make record efforts of the highest possible order. That sounds pretty cool. The ability to perform the most difficult work with extreme self-discipline, self-denial, and renunciation. Check this out. Magicians and adepts. Interesting. That definitely fits with the magic has been coming to the fore for the last several years for me. That's on the positive side. Now on the negative side, he says, hard, unfeeling disposition, severity, etc. Hard struggling for success. There is possibility for achievement. Difficult work, painstaking and thorough research, the process of growing spiritually, mentally, etc. So that actually sounds, I was glad to see, like, yeah, there, because I think that we've been in this process where Saturn's been coming together with Pluto. It's kind of like it's getting squished down. And in fact, that's the way that Stanislav Grof, a famous psychological researcher, who was also Richard Tarnas's teacher, he talks about how Saturn and Pluto represent the part of the birth process where after, at first you're just sort of floating around in your mother's womb, and hopefully blissfully, right? Hopefully you don't have to deal with, what they call a toxic womb, where there's like lots of stress hormones, or there's like other environmental toxins or whatever. And then all of a sudden, let's just say you are happy-go-lucky, whatever, and then all of a sudden, the walls start closing in on you, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? And then guess what? There's no way out because the cervix hasn't dilated yet. So you're stuck in there, and the walls are closing in, and you're going, what the heck is going on? How do I get out of here? Why do you suddenly hate me? What did I do wrong? Blah blah blah, and then comes the push, and you start getting squeezed down this tunnel, and there's this gargantuan titanic struggle to be born that happens. Sounds familiar, right? The last couple years, a lot of people have been going through those kind of feelings. And the thing is, this long parallel is now coming to a conclusion. And so to me, that the conjunction represents the end of that, the birth, because right after they make the conjunction, Saturn moves on, and they're no longer parallel. By February, they're no longer parallel. The Saturn-Pluto thing is over. Um, so, to me, that represents like that time, where, the mother's exhausted. She's like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Everybody's um, just feeling like they've given everything they've got. And then, the doctor or the midwife or whomever or hopefully the husband's there and he's coaching, or the father, which at any rate. And says, all right, now we've got to dig down deep and get ready for one last push. And I think that's also true because actually Mars is coming into the picture here by the time of the exact conjunction between Saturn and Pluto. Here's Mercury. You'll see that Mars is coming into the picture through what we call an antitia. So the parallel is Saturn and Pluto being the same distance this way. When planets are the same distance this way from a solstice point or an equinox point, we call that antitia. And that's what's going on with Mars. So, there's Mars, like, just one last push, boom, get it done. And in fact, if we go back to Kosi and we read, like, what's really great is like they combine these midpoints, Saturn, Pluto, with various other factors. So you can combine Saturn, Pluto with the sun, for instance. Physical toil and overexertion, renunciation, privation, things like that. So that last push would also be just with the sun entering into the picture. With Mars, they say the necessity to fight for one's existence or life, like literally, like, you're ready to go to battle to fight for your life. And that's what being born is, you're fighting for your life. Now with Mercury, he says the urge to do research work, thoroughness, the desire to solve difficult problems. So I think Mercury coming in there definitely lends an ability, Quicksilver, to like problem solve, to and also a little bit of a slipperiness that might be helpful in that. So I really think that, and also they're going to be joined by Ceres, y'all, the Great Mother. So there's the midwife. In fact, one of the it was really interesting to me. One of the ladies in my dream group, when I was sharing that dream, she was like, hey, that dream where that thing starts growing, it reminds me of Jack and the Beanstalk. And I was like, holy smokes, yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? And so I was going back and looking at that myth, and it is like one of the oldest myths out there, y'all. And it's very hermetic. Jack is a very hermetic figure. In fact, in early versions of the myth, it was called Jack and the Giant Killer, right? Well, guess what? Hermes was a giant killer. One of his epithets was Argiofantes. So Argus, the great giant, the great 100-eyed giant, he did him in. So I think it's really interesting, if we look at these different planets that are coming into the conjunction, you can see Mercury is like Jack or Jill or Jean, if you want a a male name that can be male and female. The fool turned trickster magician, if you will. Ceres would be the grandmother, and also the giantess. She was nurturing as well. And then the sun would be the gold, the lost creative potential that the hero or heroine goes in search of to begin with, right? And then Saturn, Pluto is the giants. Now, my feeling about it is we don't necessarily have to kill the giant, but we do have to, basically the giant represents like the negative energy that we're being, you know, confronted with, and we have to like find a way to subdue that energy or overcome that energy to get the gold, to get the that creative potential. And I think that now it might have been really difficult to do that while they were in this long run up, this parallel. But now that the conjunction's coming and it's with the sun, I think we can finally maybe begin to do that. And don't get upset with yourself if that doesn't happen right away. I do think that this conjunction is what we call a seed moment. It's like something is planted, and it may be planted in your consciousness and you're not even aware of it yet, right? And then later, that seed, right? It wasn't until the next morning that Jack woke up and found the beanstalk, right? Because, you know, his grandmother thought he was a fool and chucked the beans out the window and sent him to bed without dinner, right? And then he wakes up in the morning. Now, if this were a Netflix series, of course, you know, they would go through the first season going, oh, what are we going to do? We got no cow. How are we going to? And they would, like, you know, various ways where they would almost be, you know, like somebody would come along and is going to, you know, foreclose on their property or something. Somehow they they managed to like kick the can down, and it wouldn't be until season 2, the first episode, where it wakes up and sees the beanstalk, right? So, like, yeah, don't get into this mindset where you're like, oh, I've got to find the gold right now, you know, because the last thing you need at this point is to put even more pressure on yourself after this 4 years of pressure that you've already been through. But it's, I think, trusting the process, and really what transformed Jack from a fool into a trickster and magician was faith. He believed in magic, and he realized, like, hey, even 4 measly magical beans might be better than whatever somebody was going to give me for this cow to turn it into steaks. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, I'm going to be talking a lot more about that, because the other thing that I think is really interesting is that when you look at when we look at these decans, these 10-degree segments of the zodiac, each of them has a ruler. The third decan of Capricorn is ruled by the sun. And in the Golden Dawn system, each one of these is correlated also with a tarot card. The 2, 3, and 4 of any cardinal sign is associated with, the 3 decans of a cardinal sign is associated with the 2, 3, and 4 of that suit. So Earth sign, Capricorn's cardinal Earth, that would be discs or pentacles. So the 4 of Pentacles is the card that would be associated with this decan, where this big seed moment, this birth is taking place. So you can imagine these 4 pentacles as these 4 magical beings, right? And I actually worked up a couple variants of the 4 pentacles card that I'm sharing with my subscribers. Again, you can find out more about that program, the premium memberships, at the special offers page. I've got like a 14-page report for them with all kinds of links to other interesting reading about the Jack and the Beanstalk myth and the Stan Groff thing I was telling you about. And it's got horoscopes and it's got images, like I was sharing with you earlier for the astronomy and stuff. And so that's available. And tell you what, anybody who goes ahead and enters the Great Venus in Pisces Talisman giveaway by doing a review on iTunes or Facebook, leaving comments or sharing on Facebook, just let me know that you've done that, and send me an email, dreamastrologer@yahoo.com, and I'll go ahead and send you a copy of this report that I made for my premium members. And I'm also going to be sharing more about this with the Astrology Hub people on January 9th in the evening. They're having a big 3 or 4 day forecast event, and it's free. Um, and if you're on my newsletter list, if you aren't, go ahead and sign up for my newsletter list, because I'm going to be sending out a link so you can sign up for the Astrology Hub forecast event. And I'm going to be talking more about this, and we're going to actually be doing a meditation, guided meditation, where you can, like, you know, imagine the roots of your beanstalk going down into the underworld and growing up. And I think it's going to be really fun and experiential for people. But this idea of trusting the magic of this alignment, I think, is the what's going to turn it from this hellish experience into this new birth of new creative potential. Also, going to be doing if you're interested in that idea of the astronomy that I was talking about, or Saturn and Pluto, I have done a class about that, where I have four different lessons where I talk about the vertical dimension and how that brings new information in. And I'm going to be doing a free webinar next week with my Sky Astrology Conference colleagues. We're going to be doing that on January 16th. Because one of the things, as I said, it's not the usual case where Saturn and Pluto come together in this parallel. Usually Pluto's like way up here, or it's down here. It's like, that, I think maybe that makes a difference. So this is, so, while people say, oh, Saturn Pluto means this, well, does it always mean exactly that? Because what if Pluto's up here versus down here? And in fact, it's not just Pluto that's on the same line. It's on the same parallel with Saturn this year. It's also Jupiter. And I'm going to be talking about, and that doesn't happen very often either. And I'm going to be talking about that with on the Sky Astrology Conference webinar. What does it mean for Jupiter and Saturn to both be crossing the ecliptic plane at about the same time? So if you want to tune in to that, you can find about that event on Facebook, or make sure you're signed up for my newsletter. That's going to be a free event happening on January 16th. So hopefully I did my job as a cheerleader and midwife or what have you, and got you ready to, like, for one final push to get through this Saturn-Pluto thing, start off a new year and a new decade with some real magic and some recovering that gold of those creative possibilities, because I really think that that's truly possible this year. In fact, I was really proud, I was on the Astrology Hub podcast earlier this year, and when I get on these things, I just start talking. And even when I'm on this thing, I just start talking. I've been doing this stuff so long. I'm in my third decade of doing this, y'all. So sometimes I just start talking and stuff comes out, and I don't even realize, and the people go back later and say, what you said about this or that, wow, that was really profound. And I go, wow, I don't even remember saying that. It sounds like something I would say. And one of the things I really liked about that, Amanda, over there at Astrology Hub, she used a quote from one of the things that I said, because I was telling her how, there is this one moment of the conjunction, and it's like I was telling you, don't feel like you have to get everything done in that moment, because Saturn and Pluto are going to be going back and forth. In fact, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are all going to be conjunct within about 10 degrees the entire year. So what I said was, the entire year we can be planting these magical beanstalk seeds. The entire year we can be planting seeds for something that is potential beyond anything we can possibly imagine. And that was even before I had the Jack and the Beanstalk dream. And I go back and I look at that quote and I was like, yep, that fits right. So yeah, I think that I think that once we get over like the you know, sort of the stress and the pressure that we've been under for the last few years and get that last push, I really think that this year can result in some creative breakthroughs. And so I hope y'all are feeling it. And I hope you'll join me for some of these free events. And I'm looking forward to hearing who wants to get in the biggest fan contest for the Great Venus in Pisces Talisman giveaway. So look forward to hearing from y'all on that. And I guess that's it for this time. So until next time, bright blessings of Mercury in the heart of the sun, getting ready to steal the gold from those mean old giants, Saturn and Pluto. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.